talking The Lockdown Hauntings. This one directed by Howard J. Ford, who was the director of the pretty good zombie movies The Dead 1 and 2. And this one stars Angela Dixon as a kind of a police detective, although the marketing is going to kind of make you think it's just a Tony Todd film. He is in the movie, but it's a couple of scenes with him over Skype, so not really the main star, despite the, I would suggest, the poster and stuff making you think so. Now, before we get into the review, one of the kind of the key things about this film is that it's really about the kind of the lockdown, and was filmed in the real kind of quarantine lockdown that we had here in the UK in 2020. Now, that obviously puts some restrictions on a filmmaker, but should I, as a reviewer, give the kind of the movie a pass for certain shortcomings because it was filmed in particularly difficult circumstances? And I feel like I have to address this before I kind of go on with my review. I'm going to say, no, I'm not going to give any kind of free passes and stuff like that. But I do think it is worth addressing because obviously making a film during a kind of a quarantine lockdown period is going to be particularly difficult and more challenging, especially for kind of lower budget indie productions. And I do think that needs to be addressed. But I feel it's unfair of me to give kind of like any shortcomings that because of that are kind of a free pass, because then I'm having two levels of kind of grading. So I will be just looking at the film based on its own merits as a piece of entertainment without kind of taking into consideration maybe some of the issues that would have been raised because of this, but I do want to address them so maybe people who watch this will understand maybe that there may be some issues caused by this. But anyway, enough of all that. Let's talk about the plot here. So as I said, this takes place during the 2020 lockdown in the UK, and there is a phenomena within this movie where, because the kind of the world has quieted down, people are kind of in their houses, there's less hustle and bustle, this has made an opening for spirits, ghosts, poltergeists, things like this, to more easily kind of come through to our world because there is kind of less people out and about and things like this. And the film focuses on primarily this police detective played by Angela Dixon, who is investigating a series of killings, but initially looked like they were the work of a serial killer, and they are. However, this serial killer is actually a ghost. It's a ghost serial killer of someone who had died as a serial killer. And what will happen? You have to watch the movie to find out. So, let's talk about what works with this movie. So, low budget. What can we say that I liked? Okay, so although I do have a couple of issues with the kind of the cinematography and camera work here, I will say that I think Ford as a director, it has a very artistic style, and I think it comes across well on screen. And despite the fact that this was really just had a minimal cast and just Ford, obviously with the camera, without the kind of the big crews and things that you would normally get with a film production, the kind of the quality of the production does seem fairly high. Again, I'm going to put a pin in it because I do have just a very small little niggle with it, but for the most part, I think like the camera work here, the kind of like the shot composition, lighting, things like this actually are very impressive considering the kind of the well, for any type of film really, any low budget film, but especially if you consider it was kind of made in lockdown. It feels polished, this movie. It feels like it has had, you know, thought put behind it in regards to its setup and things like that. Obviously, you know, Ford has had some experience making, you know, a lot kind of bigger scale movies, so you can kind of see the experience behind the camera there. I would also say I do think the majority of the acting here is fairly strong, really led by Angela Dixon, who I always wonder why she hasn't done more really, but she would just come across as the kind of an actress that you would see in kind of BBC style kind of dramas, and I think she suits like a police character kind of pretty well here. Really kind of gives somewhat of an earnest performance and kind of a down-to-earth kind of character. And I think she does a great job, as do a couple of the other kind of the characters, I think, within this movie. Effects-wise, it's certainly not an effects kind of extravaganza exactly, but there are some good use of in-camera kind of and practical effects in regards to kind of like poltergeist activity. Obviously, it's just stuff being thrown around, but it was done to a reasonable standard that kind of does look like, you know, you can't see the strings attached and things like that. There are a couple of video effects which I think work less well, but nonetheless, I think some of the kind of the actual more practical stuff, the poltergeist activity and that sort of thing, it's fairly good. I don't think it's a particularly creepy film, but I think it's, you know, it portrays a poltergeist quite well. And it's somewhat kind of original in the fact that this movie, the antagonist doesn't really act like a ghost, essentially. It kind of acts like a serial killer, going through different kind of people's homes. So it kind of ignores some, you know, it is attached or you know, tethered to a certain place or person. It kind of just goes around. Again, I have a little bit of a problem with this, but it makes it for an interesting and somewhat of original style kind of ghost story to a way. And it also, it tries to have a positive message. A lot of this, what I'm going to say, is going to be mirrored to what I don't like, to be fair. But it tries to have a positive message about forgiveness and things like this. There's also a relatively high body count in this movie. I was surprised, actually, at how many people end up kind of like being harmed by this kind of spirit. So, what doesn't work? Okay, I think this movie suffers because of again, because it's shot in lockdown. There's very little kind of like person-to-person dialogue. It's lots of over the phone or on a Skype call, and as such, it's not particularly interesting. The movie suffers from being a little dull. Partially, this is because people are, you know, quote unquote, working from home, so our police are just looking at stuff on computers a lot of the time. Let's investigate the crime scene by having a look at photos and things like this. And kind of like dialogue scenes between characters are 90% of the time on phone or video chat, and it just kind of takes out some of the kind of the dramatic moments that would have been kind of raised had it been two actors kind of like conversing and things like this. So the movie comes across as being a little dull. It doesn't help, I think it's a little overlong as well and has too many characters. So the film could, I think, because it has this kind of like slower pace because of the way it's filmed, it could have been a shorter film to make it a little bit more punchy. The storyline isn't that in-depth. It didn't need to be, I mean, it's not by no means like a really long film, but it just, I think it could have been 10, 15 minutes shorter to make it have a little bit more oomph, and I think that would have suited the film a little better. There's too many characters in this movie. As I've mentioned, it does have a big body count, but there's two problems with this. There's too many characters, and a lot of the characters are cast with actresses who look very similar to one another. Now, there's a line here that says, the serial killer goes for blondes. I mean, you kind of paint yourself into a corner because of this, but fair enough, he goes for blondes. So pretty much all of our kind of like female characters are blonde. But they all have cast women who look practically the same, including kind of Angela Dixon. You know, blonde hair, slim, long, sort of straight blonde hair. And I was thinking, I'm kind of getting mixed up who's who here, because we have about, you know, six or seven different characters who looked practically the same. And it was like, either this or the director's definitely got a type. But yeah, I would have kind of varied up the casting a little bit here, because, you know, if you want to have it be blonde victims, then great. But have one with short hair, have one who is fat, have one, you know, do you know what I mean? Just kind of like vary up the kind of the amount of casting that you've got, because I'm looking at these people, I think, didn't I see her die already? Who's this person? And they just kind of look all the same, to be honest. Obviously, me as an audience member hadn't seen these girls in production and stuff like that, so I've only seen them for the time that this movie's on, and because it's only a few minutes each, I'm thinking I don't really get who these people are. And then it kind of presents other issues like, how the hell is this ghost finding them? So as I've mentioned, it doesn't seem to be tethered to anywhere. So how is this ghost selecting seemingly kind of random blonde women? How is it finding them? I mean, is it literally out stalking the streets as like a serial killer would do? I think so. It kind of has these problems that are kind of are never really addressed. It was any kind of like explanation, and then the movie's trying to point to this kind of like this spirit uprising, I suppose, but because of the lockdown, but it doesn't go into any kind of like hows and what and whys and wherefores and things like this. As I said, I think there's maybe too many victims, because, and also it's filmed in a way where the ghost seems to be attacking two people who are in different locations at the same time. And again, it's just like, is there multiple ghosts? Because this doesn't kind of make sense. So again, a little bit of confusing there. Some of the kind of the smaller parts as well, some of the smaller acting roles, I feel the acting isn't quite as good. On a kind of maybe a little bit of a nitpicky sort of side of things, the camera work here is, I feel, a little bit too whizzing around. If you just watch the first 5 minutes of the movie, you see what I mean. The director just loves like a tracking shot, and it's like someone opens the door, that kind of the camera's kind of zooming in. They're walking down the hall, the camera's kind of like whizzing past them. They open another door that's kind of like the camera zooming in from a different angle. It's like, Jesus Christ, just keep the camera static for a couple of shots. The killer itself, for some reason, the ghost sometimes wears a Halloween Michael Myers mask. Yes, literally, he wears like a Michael Myers mask, and is kind of like a serial killer. So you almost feel you're watching like an unofficial Halloween movie at times, but there are times where he doesn't wear it. And I was thinking, it's a really odd decision. So this killer seems like he can choose whether to wear this kind of mask or not. And again, it's just like you think this feels less like a ghost and just more like a person in a way, because it just feels like this ghost as an antagonist here has more options available to him. He can do pretty much whatever he wants. And again, it just feels like he's too in control. It seems too like thought through for kind of a malicious spirit in a way. And then we have some of the kind of the video effects that I feel where they're trying to make the guy like transparent and things. When they do that, I don't think it works quite as well. We have our practical effects and things moving around. I think that's pretty effective. But our video effects look like, just overlays, to be honest with you. It doesn't kind of look ethereal enough, because it just looks like video overlays. The movie never really feels all that spooky or scary, considering it's a horror film. You have all the people getting scared and stuff, but I don't know, it just never really feels particularly kind of scary as a viewer. I think partially it's because I feel some of the kind of the attack scenes have that level of confusion where you're it's having like women that are being attacked who look practically the same, and then it's like attacking a different one, and then what's going on? So you kind of, it ends up taking you out of the film again, and a lot of it is shot during the day rather than the night, which again kind of just sort of like ratchets it down any kind of like scarce factor from that. The last thing I would say is a little bit of an ill-conceived idea here, where the movie tries to make an excuse for a serial killer's behaviour. Let me put it like that. And it's actually, I'm not going to say what it is because it's kind of like a plot point, but nonetheless, there's kind of like an in-film like excuse for him, and kind of that almost in film, in the story, excuses him from what he's done, which I think was a bad move. I don't think I can really kind of get behind that. Maybe one other thing as well. It's like bloody Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. When it's trying to end this film, it feels like it's got another ending, and it has this kind of like this weird sort of like setups for what seems to be a larger universe, but it just seems ill-conceived to me. To be honest with you, when I was kind of thinking about this movie, I was thinking like a 5 out of 10. But I have to be honest, as I've kind of sat here reviewing it and gone through the points, I feel that the negatives more outweigh the positives to me. I do think it's quite an interesting film, as far as a little bit of an experiment, and there is some good filmmaking here, and there is some reasonable kind of like acting and kind of like effects and stuff. But I just feel this movie has a lot of small problems that could have been dealt with, and a lot of this has nothing to do with the kind of the fact that this was in lockdown. Yeah, I think there are some issues where the film does feel somewhat lacking, because there's not many characters on screen and things like this. But even taking that into effect, I still feel this movie has suffered from just a whole bunch of kind of small little things here that I feel could have been addressed. So I'll give this one a slightly below average, and I'll give it a 4 out of 10. Because I just feel this is kind of like a little dull, and ultimately has some just things that just don't make sense or needed to be more kind of explained and things like this. So anyway, it's a 4 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.